Forum for discussion.
Going live. Good evening, everyone. I wonder if those in the chamber could please stand and join me in the acknowledgement of country and the council prayer, please. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet tonight. I'd also like to pay my respects to elders past and present. Almighty God, we humbly beseech thee of our safe blessing upon this council, direct and prosper its deliberations to the advancement of thy glory and the true welfare of the people of the city of Clarence. Amen. Thank you. This meeting is being broadcast live on YouTube, and what's said at the meeting is not protected by privilege. There is a link to the agenda papers on Council's website. We have Alderman von Berto online. Welcome, Sharon. And Alderman Kennedy is hoping to join us. In the meantime, we'll record her apologies. Item 3, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest for Alderman or close associate?
What interest? Not always.
Thank you.
Directly or indirectly.
Moving to item 4, the rates and charges for financial year. I would like to preface this by just repeating from the agenda that the proposed resolutions give effect to the rating requirements against the budget that we set at our last council meeting and are therefore critical to the ongoing operations of council. Could I have a mover and a seconder that the recommendation be accepted, please? Thank you, Alderman Chong. Seconded, Alderman Edmonds. Alderman Chong.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This motion, as the Mayor just mentioned, sets out to allocate the estimates that we've recently approved over the city's ratepayers. As normal, we didn't agree with everything in the budget, and perhaps we shouldn't agree on it all. We all come to this chamber with different experiences and backgrounds and use those to represent our community. They, like us, have different priorities and areas of focus. Having said that, we did agree the budget. And this motion allocates that cost over the different areas of our city, from the general rate to stormwater, waste management and the fire levy. Included in those amounts are some over which council has no control. We merely act as the collection agency for the state government. That includes the new waste levy, which has been included in our waste management service charge. That amounts to, over the year, $8 for an 80-litre bin, $12 for a 120-litre bin, and funnily enough, $24 for a 240-litre bin. The fire service levy is also collected by council on behalf of the state government. We also, just before this, received revaluation adjustments for the city, which have resulted in some large increases to some areas. To offset this, the fixed charge has been reduced to $250 rather than $300. While this is not ideal, it helps offset the effects that revaluation has had on particular suburbs. Passing this motion will ensure we can undertake the ongoing work of council. I seek my colleagues' support.
Thank you, Alderman Chong. Alderman Edmonds.
Thank you. No, I don't really have anything to add other than what I said when we passed the budget. I'll stand by those comments tonight.
Thank you. Other speakers? Alderman Jones.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. May I say from the outset that I did propose to have a motion coming forward to this meeting in as much as to reduce the rating increase from 4.82 to 3.82, a savings of $565,000, which had been fully costed. However, I was advised, and I did try to make contact with the GM of that morning and left a message, and as a result of that I did not receive a response, and I wanted to discuss the process by which it could be put forward to council in the way of a motion to reduce the rates from 4.82 to 3.82. I did not receive a response. May I say also, Mr Mayor, it is very disappointing that this council has signed off on a rate increase of 4.82%. Since 2017, the rate increases for the year ending 2017 in this place was 2.30, 2018 2.60, 2019 2.90, 2020, of course, 0 in the midst of the pandemic. 2021, 3.77. In the year 2022, 23, the proposal is for 4.82, which is extraordinary amount given that the other councils in the greater metropolitan area have in fact made and announced their rate increase of in some cases, under 3%, and the highest, I think, was in Launceston as part of those larger councils. It was 3.75%. So Clarence was the second highest rate taxing base in Tasmania. Second, obviously, we are second to Glamorgan Spring Bay, which have brought in a rate increase of between 7% and 8%. They have their reasons for that, as we mostly know. So if we look at the Hobart Metropolitan Councils, Hobart has announced in today's paper in the Mercury, they've come in at 2.27%, Kingborough 2.8%, Glenorchy 3.5%, Launceston 3.75%, and Clarence just under 5%. How is that to be done in relation
James,
to
if
this?
you bear with me just for a moment, we are now to debate, and I've given you a fair time on that point, but this motion is about how the rates are to be distributed. The debate we had last council meeting was about the quantum of the rate rise. So if you could start focusing on the nature of this motion and what's on the table, it would be greatly appreciated.
Well, if you strike the rate at 4.82, which was approved at that last meeting, as I mentioned, it's going to provide some degree of hardship to those residents, particularly in Clarendon Vale, and also to some of those commercial and businesses in the city of between 6 and 7%. Now, that is an extraordinary amount, and this particular motion, if it's approved tonight, will generate those increases across those different areas of the city in relation to those residents and also to those commercial businesses and also business and commercial enterprises. There has been one key matter in relation to this, and I quote on page 60 of the last agenda on the 14th of June, and it says, I quote, "As employee costs are the largest expense category of council, this has had a significant impact on the budget estimates." So when we approve, and we probably will approve this tonight, and that means that there is going to be, caught up in the rating numbers, which is listed here in this agenda, there's going to be a very, very large increase across certain parts of the city, and it's only due to the fact that this council has not really, I believe, really taken into consideration the hardship that this will impose upon the residents of Clarence. I will not support this because I believe it's unfair, unnecessary, and it's out of keeping with the other councils which have gone to great lengths, in my opinion, to keep their rate increases under 3%.
Thank you, Alderman James. Other speakers? Alderman Walker.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I will briefly touch on the matter of the percentage of rates. And had the alternate motion of Alderman James been actually drafted and been furnished to us when we were discussing the matter, I think it would have been a really live matter because it was actually an alternate. But it is purely academic in the sense of what's being covered tonight, which is the rates and charges for the financial year. And I note what the mover said around the fact that when it comes to a lot of this rating matter, we are a collection agency when it comes to things of certain levies like the fire service, etc. That's what we are. It'd be nice to be a little bit Amex and get a percentage of the transaction fee. I think it's quite a reasonable thing to do, given the level of grief we save the state government in doing it. But that's for a debate at a future LGAT conference, I imagine. Look, there are three main rating mechanisms available to Tasmanian councils: capital value, land value and AAV, which is assessed annual value. And councils can institute, alongside this, a fixed charge component of up to 50% of an average rate. Now, if we used land value, those in the older modest dwellings, and remember that a lot of Clarence's population occurred when the first floating bridge and then the other bridge came, and there was an abundance of big blocks that people with modest means were able to start and plant their dream. Now, they would be the people that would be hit hardest if we were using land value for our rating system. And who would benefit? Well, far be it from me to say, but I do know that Tasmania's biggest shopping centre, about 100 metres down the road from us here, would be rated with land value the same as if it was, sparsely selling used caravans. That's the way land value works. The land is what the rates are determined on, not anything above that. When you mix with the actual dwellings, then you get to capital value. And I am proud that Clarence was the first mover away from AAV to capital value. No measure's perfect, but capital value is the most logical measure. It's loosely based on what a property would sell for the value of the dwelling and land and any improvements in structures. So it's what's for sale and what you pay, roughly. AAV was a dog. Look, it's a nebulous measure, trying to figure out what a rental would be. And let's be absolutely clear, if we hadn't moved away from capital value, AAV would be absolutely monstering the entry-level properties in Clarence, because the most ferocious growth in rental changes has been at the entry level. So we moved away from that. We did go to capital value, and I have concerns with what's in the rates, and that's why I'm foreshadowing the motion that I circulated to you all earlier. When we did change, I did a lot of research into it, and what was noted that if you have a fixed charge, 30% or more is considered regressive. We did institute a fixed charge when we went to capital value, because every dollar of value of a property is taxed under capital value. And so we did move to one around the 20%, was where we said it. In fact, it was 20%. And, the 20% fixed component mellows the distortion of every cent getting taxed of every dollar of value. And I don't recall at the time talking about it in a dollar term. We talked about it in a percentage term, and that's where my concerns arise tonight, because we're now decoupling away from that. And if we go with what's in the agenda, I think that probably the biggest beneficiaries will be the land bankers that have fully developed blocks serviced ready to go, but are holding on to multiple of them. There's been some great gains in that area, but they're actually probably the biggest. They are probably the biggest beneficiaries if we move away from that 20%. A 250 fixed charge as a headline number sounds better than 300, but what isn't sort of really spelled out because that number's front and big flashing lights, what isn't spelled out is the increased tax grab. So that represents a rise from the 0.14689 cent in the dollar to the 0.154116. And I believe that the case for decoupling needs to be made, and it hasn't been made away from 20%. Ratings a really serious business of council. This is something that's, workshop after workshop worth, because certainly it was multiple workshops to move from AAV to capital. Realistically, if you're going to do changes, then, I think they should be telegraphed ahead, and I think it's a little bit late in the piece for us to be making such a change at this time around. I think rating structures and systems, for families and for businesses should be, fairly certain. Because the bottom line is you could just chop and change however you want. We could go to zero fixed charge next time, or this time. Or we can go right up to 50%. They could be wild with the fluctuations with the different flavours of people around a table. So seek your support for the alternate.
Alderman Ewington?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I don't have a problem with the increase in the rates that we've struck. I think, with the rate relief that we provided during COVID, to provide some catch-up, which is obviously caused by the staff, taking a bit of a pay cut at that time as well, and then rewarded, I think is a reasonable thing. And I won't get into too much detail about the other aspect of the budget, but I think I've made my position quite clear up until now in relation to, I feel that we're missing the boat or lost our way a little bit in some of the things that we spend our time and resources and money on, and I think I'll cover that more in the annual report side of things. But on principle, I won't be supporting the budget because of those things that I think we're leaving out and we're not catching up on. But like I said, I'll address that in the annual report. But I just wanted to So, yeah, no, I'm supporting this budget.
Thank you. Alderman Blondie.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And previous speakers have all been very correct. This is a serious part of council, and we were all here nearly 2 weeks ago, Tuesday the 14th of June, where we set the rate at 4.82%. That's done and dusted. That's happened, and we at that time expressed our particular views on that and how we arrived at that. I would just like, once again, Mr Mayor, to echo my appreciation, or to reiterate my appreciation to the CFO and her team, because this has not been an easy process. It's been a complicated, exhaustive process, and I think that even though I had some reservations 2 weeks ago, as everyone knows, on the public record, I think that now that we've landed in this place, the job before us this evening, as we're informed in the executive summary, is to set the rates and charges applying to properties in the City of Clarence for the financial year 22-23. The proposed resolution give effect to the rating requirements inherent in Council's adopted estimates for financial year 22-23 and are therefore critical to the ongoing operations of Council. That's the important part here. It's just absolutely essential that tonight, having made the decision we did some 13 days ago, that we support the recommendation for us this evening. That's good governance. That's good governance. And Mr Mayor, no one likes increasing rates. In fact, today I had cause to come across the 2018 candidates pamphlet put out by the TEC for everyone that ran for office, some nearly 4 years ago. Mr Mayor, yourself, myself, other people in this chamber also will keep rates as low as possible. It's been an exhaustive process. And here we arrived this place 13 days ago at 4.82%. And sure, I read with interest the Mercury article today, and I've been watching, as I'm sure we all have, with great interest to see what the other 28 councils are doing around this state in regards to rate increases. But the one thing that I'm very proud about here in Clarence is our good financial management, because that's backed up by the exhaustive work that not only that we do as elected members or as directors, if you like, but more importantly, what our professional staff do. The CFO and her team, the General Manager and his executive team. It's and of course, as Alderman Ewington referenced a moment ago, the annual plan, which is an impressive document, but I think that, and if you allow me some sort of lenience here, Mr Mayor, I would just like to quickly point out, which backs in what I'm trying to express here, and that is it goes on to the executive summary of the plan, makes the point
Just on
that the City of Clarence has maintained its trajectory.
a point of order, Mr Mayor, we are going to debate the plan shortly. At this stage, we are debating the resolution for the charges for 22-23.
Thank you, Alderman James. I'm waiting to see, I'm sure there's information in the plan that's going to influence the decision on how we allocate the rates. I'm waiting to see from Alderman Blondie how that comes out. But
thank you, Mr Mayor. It makes a very obvious observation that anyone that's sat around this chamber and has been actually listening to the debate over successive weeks and all the workshops is that Clarence has maintained its trajectory of substantial growth. Substantial growth. We had sort of a decade of substantial growth in this city, and we're continuing to experience growing pains as we see continued development predicted to continue over the next decade. This place is going gangbusters. We know why, because people want to live here. And with that comes costs. With that comes expectations of service delivery. With that comes a 4.82% rate increase that we agreed last meeting. Today, the issue before us this evening, Mr Mayor, is, as I said before, a matter of good governance. We have no choice but to support the recommendation before us this evening.
thank you. Other speakers? Alderman Mulder?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, as the Deputy Mayor so accurately points out, we are a collection agency in a lot of respects for the state government, but we're also a service delivery arm for the state of the government. And a lot of these rates are being spent on things like managing the health regulations and food handling. We could even argue planning is something that is a state government responsibility, but the rates are being used to deliver those services. Now, the capital revaluation has caused some basic issues in this rate rise. We talk about 4.8%, but I think some areas such as Roteby are going to experience more than 12%, rise in their rates. So when we talk about that, that's all related to the capital value and the distribution that occurs. Now, my problem is that in places like Clarence Vale, and it's not unique in this city, these are the areas where people have gone in at base level housing entry, and they've got their own homes, and now they're being slugged with this cost. And we've just heard, how the electricity is going up and all the costs of living are going up, and here we are hitting them with 12%. And it's just it's surprising that we wonder what it is. And of course, the real problem here is that the public housing in these areas is actually owned by the state government. But because the state government has not-for-profit organisations managing these houses, they are exempt from rates. And that then puts a few more percentage on top of everyone else. And I've previously flagged, and obviously I'll take it on notice, but I would like to know the extent at which the residential rate for public social housing is being, how much rates the state government is actually avoiding by having not-for-profits manage these estates. Because I think if we're talking about housing, we're talking about rates, and we're talking about service delivery, here is the state government. The state government, the largest residential landowner, avoiding its rates by this artifice. So that would be an interesting question, because that quantum would then give us some idea about what the rates could have been if the state government only carried its own weight.
Thank you, volunteers.
Thank you, Mayor. 4.82, no, I'm not happy at all with it. I'm not happy at all, but the fact is, I think the public should know we started off at 8%, and we worked damn hard to get it down. And of course, everybody's not happy, we understand that. There's certain functions of this council that I believe we shouldn't even be in, which I had in my 100 words a couple of months ago, my alderman's words. I agree with things that an alderman said, that like the new council should look at functions of council, but this is not this issue tonight. It's for the rates, and 4.2 is what we got it down to. We all didn't agree, and there's things that I've missed out on getting through, and there's things that other aldermen missed out getting through. But before you criticise, and I say this to the public, look at the annual plan we're going to go through and see what's happening for the next year. I think a lot of that stuff is absolutely tremendous. Now, yes, I apologise for 4.82, but I think once you look at what's going to happen, what we're going to deliver, I think is really a fantastic effort.
Thank you, volunteers. Alderman Warren.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As a couple of my colleagues have pointed out, tonight is not a time to discuss the quantum of the rate increase. Although I can't help but just sidelining into a little bit of mathematics, in that the percentage, it's meaningless to compare the percentages between councils. It depends what the actual value of the rates is and what the dollar increase is. And you can have one council with a higher rate, which is actually less dollars, than a council with a smaller increase, but a lower base to start with. But this is not the time to discuss that. I actually have a question which I'm hoping won't be out of order, if I could ask through Mayor to the General Manager. As my colleague Alderman Blomley has clearly stated, this is about the critical business of continuing operations in the council. What would be the consequence of not passing this this evening? Because I'd like my colleagues to take that into account if they vote against this.
General Manager.
Thank you, Alderman Warren. Through you, Mayor. The consequence of not passing the rate resolution tonight would be that Council has no means under the Local Government Act to issue rate notices, so you would have a budget and no financial capacity to do any work.
Sorry, may I ask, would it also affect the ability to pay staff?
It would affect everything covered by that budget. We would have to use reserve funds, and once those are depleted, there'd be nothing more.
Thank you. So on that note, I encourage my colleagues to vote for this motion.
Thank you, Alderman Warren. Any other speakers? In that case, right a reply. Alderman Chong.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. And I thank my colleagues for their commentary tonight. And I guess just to reiterate what several people have said, this motion is not about discussing whether we like the rate increase or not. That's done and dusted. Whatever you felt, however we voted, this council agreed that rates increase, whatever we personally feel. This is about the allocation of those costs through rating. Hardship was mentioned, and I guess I just want to touch on that very briefly as it came up in the discussion. There are two ways that we're trying to mitigate those increases, which are particularly large in areas like Clarence Vale. Firstly, as Alderman Walker mentioned, and although it's not ideal, we're looking to reduce the fixed charge to $250 to $300, from $300 to $250. That will obviously have an impact at people with a lower capacity to pay. Secondly, we also agreed, when we approved the rates a couple of weeks ago, an updated hardship policy. So it was previously a COVID policy, and we've expanded that to be a general hardship policy because we recognise that things are expensive and this is an added burden on people. Having said that, this allocation of the rates is really important. As Alderman Warren has said, we need to pass this motion to ensure council to continue to function, and I seek my colleagues' support.
Thank you. So the motion before the chair is that we adopt the rates and charges for the financial year 2022 to 2023. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Moving on to item 5, the annual plan. That the recommendation is the annual plan for fiscal year 2022 to 2023 as attached to the agenda be adopted. Do I have a move and a seconder, please? Thanks, Alderman Blomley. Seconder. Thanks, Alderman Edmonds. Alderman Blomley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm delighted to move the annual plan as for the financial year 2022-23, and note that this annual plan is consistent with our strategic plan, Mr Mayor. It is it's a quality document. We've all had input into this document over or in recent times, and I think there's a couple of important takeouts, Mr Mayor, with this plan, and that is that the City of Clarence has maintained very proudly its trajectory of solid growth in recent years, and that has, of course, as I mentioned previously or earlier this evening, delivered some growing pains for the city. It has. We are growing at a great rate of knots. There's expectation there for service delivery. There's expectation there to keep our rates low. There's an expectation there from all our particular stakeholders that we continue to deliver what we're here to deliver. And this plan, Mr Mayor, sets it out very appropriately. We know from our meeting of the 14th of June, Mr Mayor, that a general rate increase on average of 4.82%. We have, through the process that we've gone through in recent months, Mr Mayor, seen targeted savings and prioritisation, and we've, through that exhaustive work, Mr Mayor, been able to deliver a rate increase around 1% below Hobart's Consumer Price Index, which is outstanding. As a top priority, as outlined in this plan, Mr Mayor, Council will be continuing critical upgrades to stormwater infrastructure throughout the city, and we know, particularly from the 7 January flood issues that we had earlier this year, that's something that is really a top priority for the city. We've also allocated an additional $1.19 million in funding for pivotal upgrades, which builds on the almost $7 million allocated in the previous financial year. Mr Mayor, for a long-term strategic project, this plan also looks at progressing work on major projects, including the City Heart Project, Clarence Plains Master Plan and the Kangaroo Development Precinct Plan as well. Mr Mayor, with those few words, it is my pleasure to move that the Council adopt the annual plan for financial year 22-23, and I seek the support of colleagues.
Thank you. Alderman Edmonds.
Thank you, Mayor. Just very briefly, I don't have a hell of a lot to add, but just to reiterate the amount of work that has gone into this and to making it a pretty accessible and easy to read document. I think it's well worth reading, and it's not a lot of time out of a ratepayer's day to have a bit of a glance at this. And I think I know no one really wants to read documents like this sometimes, but the effort that's gone into making it something that can be picked up and you can learn something about the city quite easily compared to some of the reports that come past people's desks. I think that's worth applauding, and I know all those people involved in that have my thanks. I do have a question about on page 10, about the people-friendly city. There's some and there was a reference in the introduction and indeed the opening remarks about the City Heart Project. I just wonder, what's the next 12 months look like for the City Heart Project, is my question.
General Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Alderman Edmonds. We are expecting to have the expression of interest publicly advertised this Saturday for engagement of the consultant to do that, and that includes an anticipated work program for the next 12 months, developing the plan, the consultation process and so forth. So that should start from the next few weeks as that goes out.
Thank you, and that concludes my remarks.
Thank you. Other speakers? Alderman James, I think, and then Alderman Unick.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and it's very interesting to follow the sequence of events that have occurred in relation to us tonight passing the estimates, and following on from that is the actual annual plan. So what we have in front of us is the way in which we are going to have to meet a lot of these issues that have been spelt out in the annual plan. And I'd like to refer to page 5 of the plan and just indicate some areas that will have a greater input on the city insofar as what we are going to use the funds for in order to meet the budget estimate and also what we have approved in relation to the estimates. So under communication and strategic development, in there is a component about the actual customer contact, the General Manager's office, and also the actual development and promotion of the city. And we know that from the estimates and what was approved this evening, that $1.3 million has been approved in the estimates that we actually approved this evening for 12 new positions in the city at a cost of $1.3 million. And that is probably the largest, and employee costs I mentioned earlier, are the largest expense category of council, and this has a significant impact on the budget estimates. And so under communication and strategic development, I've just singled in on that one for the moment. There's going to be, in my view, because of its location within this particular chart, that it's going to have a large amount of money, which I believe is part of the consultancy and promotion of the city as part of one of the key areas within the city, and it's going to be part of the communication and consultation and under the wings of the General Manager's office. And that is going to take quite a bit of the funds, in my opinion, as far as promotion and following through on the city plan. The other one that seems to be biting into the estimates, which we approved this evening, is in relation to governance. The governance in particularly to corporate governance and also the legal support that this council has spent a lot of money and will spend a lot of money, because that's in the estimates, as far as seeking outside legal support and advice in relation to a number of issues, and not including the Shambroad or, in fact, the other matters that have come before the council, which will continue to come before council, given that there hasn't been at this stage any resolution regarding Shambroad, and also the fact of the matter is regarding the boulevard. So I would have thought that during the course of the 22-23 financial year, there will be significant funds that have been approved in the budget, which will obviously fall within particularly the category of governance and also communication strategic development. And the other factor too is, in fact, it was mentioned earlier, our city culture and also the community development and so on and so forth. So look, even though community service is an important one, I still think that we need to come back to the core principles of the city. And here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different categories, and really, if you want to boil it down to what really matters in the city, then we should be looking at roads, rates, and also rubbish recycling as the state levy, and I'm a supporter of that, and also to stormwater, and those key issues should be foremost in our mind, and really we should be not getting involved in and spending large amounts of money, which we have approved, in my opinion, in relation to communication strategic development, and also some of these other matters of governance, which I don't think are really necessary, and they have a dollar value on them, and they have been actually approved within the budget estimates this evening. I think we really need to go back and have another look at this. And one of the aldermen at the Hobart City Council today made the comment, and I really believe that's really appropriate, and I agree with him, and that is that this council should not be making decisions prior to the council elections this year, and that means any of these motions that may come forward in relation to this matter.
Thank you, Alderman James. So I'm going to hand the chair over to the Deputy and respond to a couple of those points you made. In terms of communications, you might recall at the last election that we're under a lot of criticism of the council for not consulting very well with the community. A lot of the beefing up in that area is actually to ensure and give us the capacity, in fact, to be able to carry out those communications that are so vital and that we recognise need beefing up. And I think the fact that we are a growing city is an important part of that. In terms of legal costs, you mentioned those as well, and I think it's really important to point out that we've had some pretty important cases to fight in the interests of the ratepayers of this city. I mentioned, for example, the airport rating issue at the moment, which we've been to the High Court and back. We've had, in hindsight, we've had the expenses awarded to us in our favour, I'll hasten to add, just so there's no ambiguity there. And the number of times that this council has found itself having to defend cases in the TASCAT tribunal, and that's also impacted very heavily on the cost of our legal services. Kangaroo Bay obviously is a signature project for this council, and of course there's been legal expenses working through the fact that there's been a significant disruption to that due to the pandemic, and we've had to take legal advice. So I think this council is being very, very responsible in terms of being a model litigant, a good citizen, and looking after the ratepayers of this city and going about what it's doing. I'll now take the chair back and call for any other speakers. Alderman Ewington.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I mean, obviously, I've made quite clear when I came on the council, one of my key areas I wanted to look at was the sport and recreation and parks and playgrounds and picnic areas and those sort of things that we have in our community. And while I say that the roads, rubbish and rates is very important, I'd also put that up in the same level. And I believe that having great infrastructure in that space can deal with a lot of the community development issues, do a lot of the city culture, do a lot in terms of health and wellbeing. And I personally believe that as a city over the last few years that we had neglected that space, and that was my motivation to put my hand up to do what I'm doing now. Now, one of the things that I did as part of that process was ask my colleagues to consider looking at a sport and recreation advisory committee to actually address some of these issues and do some planning in that space. I'm quite pleased to see that we're very close to having a plan come back to council to be considered, and I look forward to any other feedback from my colleagues in the community. I'd say the community have been, what we've seen so far has been reasonably positive. But I come back to my main concern in relation to this space is that because we're dabbling in some of those non-core areas that I think, some of them are important, but I don't agree with all of them there, that we just won't have, that I'm concerned that this document will sit on the shelf somewhere and end up being something that doesn't get action because, when you look at the annual plan now, there's stuff that was improved in budgets 2 and 3 years ago that is still not even the annual plan for next year. I mean, if I look at something like, master plans, finalising master plans for Little Howrah Beach, I mean, there was things there for, we've got to advance the state-of-the-art dog park. Well, actually, I think that one might be in there, but I personally believe that we don't have the resources inside council at the moment, and the reason why we're so far behind is because we haven't got the staff to do this work, and even the GM admitted to that when I asked a question last meeting about why the Bellary Beach pavilion and change rooms and toilets and the cafe restaurant side of things hadn't even been investigated, and that's 2.5 years since we actually passed that motion to go down that path. Now, there's some other things too. I mean, I look at some of the other documents that have come across my desk in my role in the Sport and Rec Committee. I mean, there's stuff here from a Clarence City Council Sport and Active Rec Strategy 2012 to 2037. When we had and this is not so much sport and rec, but it is rec if you consider. And this was about looking at some of the council buildings that we could look at repurposing or reusing to give us the resources to adopt some of these things, and some of the older historic buildings that could be converted into other activities that might be better used. We've got developing a nighttime economy. January 2020. We've got Rosny Park Urban Design Framework from City Planning in 2019. I've got a Clarence Open Space Strategy prepared by leisure planners from July 2017, and this is something that was supposed to be looked at as part of the Sport and Recreation Committee, and we still haven't got around to actually looking at, well, where are our parks going to be placed, where the playground's going to be, are we going to have the all abilities equipment, which Alderman Edmonds had a motion up a couple of months ago to look at adopting all of that. And I see all these sort of things that are sort of half done and half started, and I know it's hard to find ways to get things done, but the GM comes to us at times to say, look, we need more staff in the planning space to get that work done. We need more staff in environmental health or whatever. And I've been arguing for this for a long time to say that, if we don't look at resourcing, our council staff to get into some of these things, and some of it is the economic development side of things to give us the resources to get some of this work done, I look at it all and think, well, in 2 or 3 years' time, a lot of the stuff that we've had in budget 3 or 4 years ago still won't be delivered. And like I said, when it comes to the strategic plan, hopefully that we're going to adopt, we're just not going to get there. And I mean, look, I know I probably sound like a broken record, and I apologise for that. And I know that sometimes you might get sick of me saying it, but I just don't know what else to do other than say that, as someone who feels so passionate about this space, and I think that it could add so much more to the quality of life of our whole community, in terms of economic development as well, in terms of city culture and community development. I just believe that is a better way for us to go in relation to delivering things. And the reason why we're in this space now is because we've neglected it over the last 10 years at least. We really haven't had any major infrastructure projects or done the planning work. When sometimes we get to budget time, we've got about 5 minutes to work out which playground we're going to work on next, or which master plan is going to be prioritised. And if the staff haven't got the time to prepare some of that information and put it in front of us more regularly, and us to allocate more time on that stuff rather than some of the other things we waste time on, well, we're still going to be, mucking around with these sort of things in a few years' time. But anyway, look, I know it's tough. Everyone's got different opinions on what we should be spending money on. I know it's a tough gig from the GM's perspective to try and keep all of us happy and find ways to deal with everyone's different, requests. But look, I mean, I look at this and think, well, on one hand, I feel like, I've achieved a little bit in relation to some of the things that I've tried to sort of push for.
Thanks, Alderman Ewington.
It's time I sit down.
Other speakers. Alderman Moulder and then Alderman Walker.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The words roads, rates and rubbish gets a few runs, and I'd like to add perhaps we should be thinking about recreational, and under that we can put all the passive and active recreation. We can also put the management of our parks and reserves and all those sorts of things. So there's that recreation space. And when the Local Government Act talks to us about, for the health and well-being of the community, I think that is the area we should be focusing on, because we've tended to take a very, very broad approach to that, to the point where, because it says we can do it, we therefore feel we should be playing in this space, and consequently we're spending rates on stuff that is actually the responsibility of the state government, who raise taxes and get money to do those sorts of things, and then actually push the costs onto their little subordinate agency, namely what so-called local government. The other thing that I'll pay tribute to the work of the staff who produced these things, as we've done just with the estimates at the last council meeting. But really, and we've put a lot of work into this as well. But that work tends to come into two categories, which aren't reflected in this plan. We do the capital budget, which projects we're going to look at, and then we do the recurrent budget. And that's where all these other programs and all these other things, plus the maintenance of our infrastructure, is discussed in that rate. And I think that if we're going to do an annual plan, we really should be pulling out how much of this are sunk costs that we need to maintain the infrastructure we have, and then we can start to think about what new capital projects we should do over the top of that and what impact that has. And I think that there's lots of these things. So in terms of the master plans, I share the facility. We've got a lot of master plans that are that old, but by the time they come to getting done, they need to be renewed, reviewed and updated again, and so we start the master planning process again. I think we need a master plan of master plans so that we can work out which ones are the priorities, which ones to focus the efforts on, and only when we've got it and started that particular program, and there might be only one or two a year, do we then start to go into designing the master plan for the next area that we're going to work on. Because a lot of these master plans are actually gold-plating areas that may not be world-class standards, may deserve to be better, but then they are in particular areas where this infrastructure already exists. No, the footpath mightn't be wide enough and it mightn't meet modern standards, and no, your toilet block mightn't be modern standards, but there are areas where these things don't even exist in the city, yet they're being charged the same rates. And sometimes I think these master plans need to look a bit more of need rather than wants and nice to haves. So that's my commentary on the plan. It talks about where your rates are spent, and you get this massive figure which sort of reflects it. But a lot of that is maintenance on roads. A lot of that money isn't actually council rates; it's government, federal and state government contributions. Our rate base is insufficient for us to build a new road. That's why all these roads that we talk about so much are actually funded by state and federal government. And that's why the road strategies and the road priorities are so important, because that's about the only say we have in trying to prioritise where state and federal money is spent. Now, it doesn't really, so I mean, it's a bit misleading, I think, to say where your rates are spent and then put roads up there, when a lot of that money is just, the rates money is being spent on maintenance of the infrastructure. But the capital projects, by and large, are funded by other levels of government, so they're not the rates at all. They're the taxes of the people. Now, it's not a question really, and mostly a lot of this is lost because it's the same, the ratepayers are the taxpayers. And they don't particularly care which level of government their money is laundered through, as long as it makes it. But in our particular case, we're sitting here balancing these needs about projects we'd like to get up and doing, and a lot of this stuff we're dependent upon others, and we really do need to get back to our basics of where we spend our money. And I'm also with it, and I would like to see our plans in the future tell people exactly what is our recurrent budget, what is our maintenance cost for our roads compared to our capital costs, and what the rate contribution is that. Because when the general public get to see some of those figures, they'll start to realise what a small pot of money we have to work with. And neither does it help much, as I said before, when the state government engages in tax avoidance by fronting off its own rating responsibilities for public housing.
Thank you. Alderman Walker.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Are there paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs of things in this document that I disagree with? Yep. Am I going to vote against it? I don't think so. I think I will vote for it. I'll take a very dim view, though. One of the reasons is that I haven't produced an alternative annual plan and circulated it to you, which would be the right thing to do. I will take a dim view if this gets weaponised and someone says to me, well, we have to do this because, you know, page 39 says we're going to go and solve that problem, even if it's impractical, infeasible to do it. So put that on the record. It was noted with an earlier, in part of the earlier debate, that this sort of sits under and aligns with the strategic plan. Strategic plan was unanimously supported 11-all in April of 2021. Not 12-all, 11-all. I was away, I was out, and I wouldn't have supported it on the night. I'd like to think I was productive because Mercury, if you're listening, I was out doing other things, and that included listening to the community, understanding what was needed and trying to advocate for things that were going to really help this community along. So, one of those was successful, was $200,000 of funding for what's going to be the state's first, a demonstration seniors outdoor exercise park on the Eastern Shore. So we're in a tough budget environment, but there's a $200,000 project that isn't coming from the rate base, and I can't see it in the passive recreation list on page 34. So through you, Mr Mayor, can I confirm that that project isn't on the list of things to do for the 22-23 year?
Mr Graham, are you able to assist us there?
Through you, Mr Mayor, can we point to which page, sorry?
I'm on page 34.
In terms of whether we'll complete all those projects this financial year?
Well, in terms of the fact that the Seniors Outdoor Exercise Park that is funded by state government isn't there. Is that to confirm that it won't be occurring in the 22-23 year?
We're working towards the timing of, for that particular project, we're working towards the timing of the actual funding. I think from memory, but I can do a further briefing to all of them. I think the timing of that funding is due in 2024 from memory, and so that's when we're aiming to have the project completed, but we are working on that.
So to clarify, you're talking about when the expiration date of us being able to use the funding is?
Yes, yes.
Right, but we can we can use it from tomorrow if we have capacity.
Yes.
So again, there's lots of money here that we're having to sort of spend on things, and there's dollars that could be done sooner. So look, we need to. The legislation requires to do an annual plan. I haven't come up with an alternate. But this doesn't have to be set in stone, and as opportunities and priorities advance, we need to make the most of those. And when things become impracticable or unwise, then again, this is not a document that should be weaponised against those of us that have voted for it to meet the legislative requirement.
Thank you. Alderman Pearce.
Thank you, Mayor, and I will support the annual plan, and I do thank the staff for their efforts, but mind you, you know, people don't realise that Alderman put a hell of a lot of time into this. I'd just like to reiterate words that Alderman Ewington said, because I've got those too, and they go back to so many years and nothing's happened, so I get frustrated. And Alderman Mulder, we're talking about, and how many times have I said it? We've got that many master plans and nothing's happening. Let's just calm down, get a master plan and do the damn job and have done with it. And, you know, I'd be a lot happier if that was the case, instead of having master plan after master plan. But look, thankfully, the annual plan here has got some very good things in it, and I certainly hope these progress, and I'll be happy if they do.
Thank you, Alderman Pearce. Other speakers? Case, right a reply, Alderman Bonney.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I'd like to thank colleagues for their contributions this evening. I will just make a couple of points, Mr Mayor, and the first one is I never, ever get sick of listening to Alderman Ewington's contributions because they're often insightful and add value to the debate. I'd also just like to take up from where Alderman James's contribution and just make the point, Mr Mayor, that it's an honour to stand in this place. We've been elected to do a job. It's not always easy, but our residents and ratepayers who elect us to this chamber expect us to actually do our job. And that requires us to come into this place and to vote on matters like before us this evening. Not to push it down the road to October or post-October when there's an election. We're required to actually stand up, make the tough decisions and vote on this issue, which is exactly what we're about to do right now. It is an honour, Mr Mayor, to stand in this place. And I think that anyone who's listening to the debate this evening would understand that the vast majority of us as elected members and all the staff are committed to good public policy outcomes for the residents and ratepayers of our great city. In regards to master plans, just picking up on the last point then made by Alderman Pearce, can I assure him that the concern that he expressed is shared by many other people, and dare I say all of us. And that's why, Mr Mayor, this time next week I'll have a motion on the agenda dealing with master plans so that we can, in an open and transparent way, prioritise our master plans, but most importantly ensure that once we've actually prioritised what's important, that we ensure they're appropriately resourced. So we actually deliver on what we say we're going to deliver. And thirdly, and as importantly, Mr Mayor, that is then very transparently communicated to our residents so that everyone understands what this council is in the business of delivering. With those few words, Mr Mayor, I commend the motion before the Chair.
Thank you, Alderman Bromley. So the motion before the Chair is we adopt the annual plan for 2022-23, which is attached in the report. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. And that brings us to the end of this open meeting. Could you please close the feed?